The Man Next to You. Original stories of ordinary people in extraordinary hours, the ones history forgets to name. Season 1, The 100 Hours. Episode 6, Going South. The ceasefire didn't sound like anything, and that was how they knew it was real. Sergeant Eli Cordova had braced his whole body for the silence to break, had spent the last hours of the 100 waiting for the quiet to be a trick, for the desert to open up one more time, and instead the morning just came, gray and then gold, and nothing happened, and nothing kept happening. And slowly the not happening became a thing you could almost believe in. The guns were down, the order had come. It was over, or the shooting part was over, which to a soldier is the only part with a clock on it. "So that's it," Whitfield said from the gunner's seat, in the tone of a man poking something to see if it's dead. We're done, we won. Is that what one feels like? 'Cause I gotta tell you, Sergeant, I expected to feel taller." "You feel tired," Cordova said. "That's what one feels like. It feels exactly like tired." Doss didn't say anything. Doss had gone quiet over the last day in a way Cordova was keeping an eye on. Not the bad quiet, not yet, just the quiet of a 19-year-old whose furniture had been rearranged. The kid had helped a medic work on a wounded enemy boy. The kid had handed fuel caps to a truck driver who'd run lightning to reach them. The kid had crossed a line of departure a child, and the war had spent 4 days making him into something else. And now it was over, and he had to figure out how to carry it. Cordova knew that job. Cordova was still doing that job, 8 years and 1 war later. "Mount up," Cordova said gently. "We're turning south. We're going home, or at least we're going toward it. Doss, you hear me? Home." Doss looked up. "Home," he repeated, like a word in a language he was relearning. "Yes, Sergeant." The road south was the whole war laid end to end, and Cordova rode it, standing in the open hatch with the wind in his face, and watched the entire machine he'd been one small gear inside of finally become visible to him. Because going forward, you only ever saw your own piece. You saw your platoon, your lane, the next 300 meters. But going back, the whole thing unrolled alongside the road like a parade of everyone who'd made the 100 hours happen. And Cordova, burned out, hollowed, more tired than he had words for, found himself doing something close to praying after all, a wordless thank you aimed at strangers as the pieces went by. A fuel convoy passed them, headed the other one, north, still working, the war's logistics not yet caught up to the war's ending. A long snake of soft-skinned trucks driven by exhausted kids. And on the lead tanker, behind the wheel of a Hemet, with the world's most flammable cargo, Cordova caught half a second of a face he thought he recognized. A young woman with cracked lips who'd shaken his hand in the gray light at a refuel point and told him she'd come up through the lightning. She didn't see him. She was watching her road. Momentum is armor, he thought, and almost laughed. And she's the momentum. He threw her a salute she never saw, and meant it more than most salutes he'd given to men with bars on their collars. Overhead, high up in the clean blue, a flight of aircraft crossed south. Ugly, beautiful, snub-nosed attack jets going home to their field, and Cordova lifted his face to them and thought about the storm on day 1, about the sun that had bloomed on his flank when something up there had reached down through the brown and killed the thing that was about to kill him. He'd never know who. Some pilot, some name he'd never have. He raised his hand to the sky anyway, to all of them, the gods who'd come down out of the lie and into the truth on his behalf and gone back up and never asked to be thanked. The jets didn't waggle their wings. They didn't know he was there. That was all right. That was the deal. A dust-off helicopter beat across the sky to the east, low and fast, Red Cross on the nose, still hauling the hurt of a war that had officially stopped hurting people. And Cordova thought of his own wounded, of Ramirez on a litter, of the medic who talked the whole time, of the bird that had carried friend and enemy south on the same floor with their blood, the same color. And he hoped, with a fierceness that surprised him, that all of them had made the golden hour. He would never find out. You almost never found out. You patched the man and passed him up the chain, and the chain carried him out of your story. And you had to learn to let not knowing be a kind of peace instead of a kind of wound, or it would eat you. And then there were the prisoners. The road ran for a while alongside a great holding area, acres of them, a defeated army sitting in the sand in long, patient rows under the eyes of a few exhausted MPs, waiting for water, waiting for trucks, waiting for whatever came after the worst week of their lives. Cordova looked at them and felt the strange, complicated thing he'd been feeling since day one. Since the first of them came up out of the trenches with their hands open and their leaflets waving, that these were the men he'd been sent to fight, and that they were just men, boys, most of them, somebody's DOS, and that the distance between enemy and person had turned out to be no distance at all once the shooting stopped. The convoy slowed for something on the road, and in the slowing Cordova found himself stopped almost even with the edge of the wire, and there, close enough to see, was a boy, 16 maybe, sitting in the front row, and in both hands held against his chest the way you'd hold something holy, was a surrender leaflet, filthy and soft and falling apart, the kind that had rained out of the sky for weeks. Cordova went very still, because he remembered. Day one, the dark before dawn, the first seep of them coming in, and one in particular, a terrified kid holding up a paper as the column ground past. Close, too close. And Cordova in the top of the track had looked down at him over the long barrel of a machine gun and made the smallest decision of the whole war. The one that took half a second and no courage, and that he hadn't thought about since. He had not fired, and he had pointed the boy rearward. That way, go, live. And then the column had carried Cordova on into the storm, and he had forgotten the kid entirely inside the next thing and the next thing and the next. He hadn't forgotten. He just hadn't known he'd kept it. The boy was looking at the convoy, scanning the vehicles the way the surrendered scan their captors. And whether he recognized the scorched flank of one particular Bradley, or the shape of one particular soldier in one particular hatch, or whether it was only that any soldier looking at him for too long made him clutch his paper tighter, the boy's eyes found Cordova's and stopped. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the boy lifted the leaflet, just a little, held it up, the way he must have held it up that first dark morning, not as a question this time, not please, but as something else, an acknowledgement, almost an offering. You see this? This is the thing you gave me. I'm still here because of the half second you didn't take. And Cordova understood, all at once and completely, what the paper had become to the boy, and what he himself had become to the boy. A thing the kid would carry his whole life, the same way Cordova would now carry the kid. And his throat closed, and he did the only thing there was to do. He raised his hand. Open, empty, the oldest sign there is. The boy pressed the leaflet flat against his chest and bowed his head. Once, slow and grave, and then the convoy lurched and moved, and the wire and the rows and the boy slid back into the dust. And Cordova let his hand come down and found that Doss had been watching the whole thing from the gunner's hatch with that rearranged look on his too young face. Was that? Doss started. Yeah, Cordova said. From the first morning. The kid you... Yeah. Doss was quiet a moment. Then, he kept the paper. He kept the paper. The whole war. Doss's voice did something. All the way through, he kept the paper. People keep what saves them, Doss, Cordova said. Sometimes it's a paper. Sometimes it's the man in the next seat. You hold on to whatever got you through, and you don't ask it to make sense. He looked at the kid, at the blood long since washed off the hands, at the eyes that had seen the medic and the enemy boy, and the fuel driver, and now this, at the whole rearrangement of a 19-year-old into a man. You did good out here. I want you to hear me say that, in case nobody else does. You crossed that line a kid, and you carried your weight every hour after, and you never made me sorry you were in my track. That's the whole job. That's all any of us did. We carried our weight, and we took care of the man next to us. Doss's eyes were bright. He looked away out at the desert, at the parade of the whole machine unrolling south toward home. The next thing, he said quietly, almost to himself, and the man next to you. Cordova looked at him. Something eased in his chest, a thing he hadn't known was clenched. "You were listening," he said. "I was listening, Sergeant." "Good," Cordova said, and turned his face back into the wind. Then it took. Then it was worth it. Then maybe the whole thing was worth it. They passed once a stretch of road the war had caught at its worst, a place where a fleeing column had been found from the air. And Cordova made his crew look at it exactly once, the way he'd promised himself he would, so that none of them would ever be able to pretend it had been clean or easy or anything other than what it was. They looked. Nobody spoke. And then he had them turn their eyes back to the south, to the road home, because you owe the dead your witness, but you owe the living your hope. And a soldier has to learn to carry both at once or be crushed by either. The oil fires burned behind them, painting the northern sky. Ahead, somewhere past the curve of the earth, was the rest of their lives. Eli Cordova went home that spring and got older, the way the lucky do. He married and worked and raised children who could not imagine him young, and he told almost none of it, because the people who would understand didn't need to hear it, and the people who needed to hear it would never understand. But on certain nights, the quiet ones, the whole mosaic would come back to him at once the way it had unrolled along that road going south. The truck driver in the lightning, the jets in the clean blue, the helicopter hauling the hurt, the MPs with their water, the prisoners in their patient rows, the medics' endless talking, the school teacher he never met translating mercy into a language he didn't speak, and a 16-year-old boy pressing a ragged scrap of paper flat against his chest because a tired man in a turret had taken half a second to point him toward living instead of away from it. None of them had known the others. That was the thing he understood, lying awake, that he'd never been able to explain to anyone who hadn't been there. Each of them had only ever seen their own small piece: the lane, the cockpit, the litter, the hose, the clipboard, the leaflet. None of them had seen the whole. It had taken all of them, every nameless one, each doing the next thing and taking care of the man next to them, to make the 100 hours into something the world would later sum up in a sentence and a date. And only the road going south had ever shown him the shape of it. Only looking back, the next thing he'd think, an old man in the dark and the man next to you. That was the whole war. That was the whole of everything, really. He'd close his eyes and cross the line one more time, and this time, every time now, for the rest of his life, he'd remember to point the boy toward home. You've been listening to The Man Next to You. These people are fictional. What they carried was not. This was the final episode of Season 1, The 100 Hours. Thank you for walking the whole desert with me. Until then, and always, take care of the man next to you.